Welcome, everyone. It is 12 o'clock and we are going to start right on time. So I want to welcome you to our collaborative learning series on the intersection of literacy and behavior. This community of practice is made possible through partnerships across organizations who are working to strengthen teacher preparation across California. Just to give you a little bit about the series, we are inviting you to join this collaborative learning series. It's been brought to you by the Cedar Center, California CEC, and the UC CSU Collaborative. This community of practice is a space to engage with colleagues and experts across the state as we explore how to better equip tomorrow's teachers to support all learners with a focus on students with disabilities and those who benefit from explicit self-regulation, instruction, and trauma, social emotional learning, and trauma-informed practices. Our session today will address trauma-informed approaches for teaching practices that support literacy. Before we begin, I want to introduce our partners in the work, the UC CSU Collaborative, the Cedar Center, and the California State CEC. California CEC, unit of CEC, helps to disseminate the California-centric information on pending legislation, research, professional development, resources, and impactful sustainable practices. California CEC strongly encourages communication, collaboration, and active engagement between our members who reside within our expansive and very diverse state. Next, I'm going to send it to Kate from CEDAR to introduce the CEDAR Center.
Hi, everyone. The Cedar Center is the collaboration for effective educator development, accountability, and reform. We are a national technical assistance center that is funded by the United States Department of Education Office of Special Programs. Cedar has been providing technical assistance across the country since 2013, and California has been one of our first cohorts. Next slide. The California Cedar team represents educator and leader prep programs, state agencies, and professional organizations. They work to support inclusive practices in education and build stronger connections among teacher and leader prep programs in K-12 schools to ensure opportunities to learn for students with disabilities. One of our major things that have put out, and this is the second iteration, is the HLP California TPA matrix with resources. And you can use these and to cross-reference any TPA that you are working on with HLPs and resources for better classroom approaches for all your teacher education programs and for your future teachers to use. I am now going to hand it over to Laura with the UC CSU Collaborative.
Hello. As a reminder, the Collaborative is a collective of UC CSU teacher ed programs, and we work with community colleges, private, independent, IHEs, LEAs, and nonprofits. And we bridge educator preparation to the California statewide system of support, and we are thrilled to be working with CEDAR and California CEC. And we have future opportunities coming up in the chat. With more information available on ARRAYA website. Next slide, please. At the Collaborative, one of the main projects we're working on is ARRAYAlearning.org, which is a resource hub. You see the QR code on your left there. You can access the website through the QR code or ARRAYAlearning.org. Next slide, please. Once you get onto the website and register and everything is free, you can go to the right side where it says communities. If you click on communities, you will see the connecting high leverage practices and literacy and positive behavior support. So you can click on that. And that will take you to this landing page. And here you're able to create a new post. You can also reply or react to other posts. And then if you click on Community Library, you'll see many resources. So you'll see our partners, general resources, and you'll also see the previous session. So the slides and the recording for session 1. And then if you scroll down, you'll also see the slides and recording and resources from session 2. And after today, within about the next week or so, we'll have slides and recording of this session. And briefly, I want to go over the first 2 sessions, which, as I mentioned, you can also find on ARRAYA.org. The first session covered strategies for educators to boost self-regulation in the classroom, especially in literacy lessons. And the second session covered social emotional learning skills, how to embed these skills prior, during, and following a literacy lesson in books that support social emotional learning.
Hi, everyone. I want to take a moment and introduce our presenter for today, Dr. Rebecca Yez. She is an associate professor at the University of San Diego School of Leadership and Education Sciences in the Department of Learning and Teaching. Dr. Yez teaches in the PhD program for education in education for social justice and dual teaching credential and master's programs. She has contributed to the field of education through scholarship on culturally responsive and sustaining inclusive practices, trauma-informed approaches, healing practices, holistic assessment of learners, post-secondary transition for TK through 12 learners, literacy, and effective collaboration with learners, families, educators, and communities locally, nationally, and globally. She is a part of our California CEDAR team. Please welcome Dr. Rebecca Yez. You are muted, Dr. Yez.
Thank you for that. Okay. Thank you so much. So today I have 3 areas that I'm going to try to get to. The first one is really looking at our own reflexive and reflective processes as we work on implementing and embodying trauma-informed approaches. How to identify trauma-informed approaches that are linked to high-level practices and literacy development, and then how to support teacher development by truly embodying these different elements like safety and trustworthiness, relationship, cultural, and holistic healing, addressing student-specific needs by empowering and providing choice and increasing all voices. So I want to just start out by really thinking about the difference between reflexive and reflective. As educators, I know that we've all taken time to really kind of look inward at our own, excuse me, biases, assumptions, and hopefully also our positionality. So how is the power of the role as an educator or parent or even student influencing or allowing for privilege just based on your experiences and views. And so if we understand what our own beliefs are and where they come from, then we can better position ourselves for making an impact within our communities as well. The reflective piece, which we talk about more easily within the field of education, is looking back, like, this is what happened in my lesson, and this is what I could do better next time. It's also really helpful to think about how your power and privilege impact each one of those situations. So I thought I would kind of take us through some of the ways that we all survive and thrive in this world through trauma-informed approaches. And so I want you to think about how, to what extent have you done the following things? And just, you can use the never once or more than once in about the last 2 weeks. So the first one is, how often or to what extent have you broken up projects into reasonable sized tasks? The second one is, how often have you chosen to work on one task versus another based on your capacity at that moment? How often have you moved your body during a meeting, maybe stretched or wrung out your hands, left for a bio break, or walked around your space? What about taking a deep breath as you thought deeper about something? Reached out to a loved one to talk about something that's been on your mind? Made a choice between two good options, or maybe even two difficult options? Used AI to get you started or to check your work? Chosen a font or a style or size that was visually appealing to you? Used voice to text or voice memos when reaching out to someone to save time? Made sure you were taking good care of your body, good food, exercise, sleep? Maybe engaged in self-care to reduce stress or anxiety. Maybe you did some journaling or got a massage, which I wish I had, but had a cup of tea or water, took a nap, or even missed a deadline. When we think about the impact that trauma has, it's always good to kind of start out with, what is trauma? And so I lean on the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration for my definition. And they talk about the 3 E's of trauma. The first one is that trauma is an event. There's some sort of incident that happened. And then the individual that had that event happen, or that incident, has some sort of experience, perception, or impact. And then there's an effect. It could be neurological, behavioral, emotional. It could have some sort of consequence just beyond regular day-to-day. And then another thing to keep in mind is that schools and educators have a role in developing policy practices and procedures. The SAMHSA provides these 4 R's about what that role is. And the first one is that we have to realize that trauma exists for some of us. And once we understand the impacts and supports, then and that they're important, then we can move on with developing these policies, practices, and procedures. The second thing is to recognize. So this is knowing what the signs, symptoms, and strategies are. The third one is to respond, and so acknowledging and addressing trauma through integrating trauma-informed approaches. And then, of course, the resisting re-traumatizing. So this is proactively working with parents and families and community members to prevent any reactivating trauma. And this is in classrooms when we are fostering safety and with healing environments and supportive practices. So some examples of trauma in schools is one, I'm not sure how many people have heard about the ACEs, or the Adverse Childhood Experiences. This came out of a study. There's actually one of the resources that I provide later on is well, now I'm forgetting it, but I will point out the book as Something Well. One of the studies actually that Kaiser did down here in San Diego was they took a look to see what different impacts of people's childhood then impacted them later on in life. And what they found, and it's just a 10-question survey that doctors or social workers could ask to learn about this. And it's the questions are about abuse, neglect, and just household dysfunction. And what they found is that when someone had 4 or more, then they had a higher level of having negative outcomes in adulthood. So addiction, struggling with jobs, and being successful in schools and things like that. Another area that we see impacting schools is threats like lockdowns, active shooters, ICE, showing up to schools, and bomb threats. I will say, yeah, I've been in higher ed teaching courses in higher ed since about 2007. And I've taught the courses on positive behavior supports and communities and how to support students. And when I first started, our course did not have what to do with an active shooter on campus, or what to do, how do you organize a lockdown as a teacher? And now that is very much a part of the training that we have for teachers. So being really aware of that and are aware that when we have opportunities for creating a plan and understanding the importance of a plan, that the students, the teachers, the support staff are usually able to get through these very scary events a little easier. Another thing that happens that impacts schools is natural disasters. And, we had our global pandemic. And these are outside of how we used to train teachers and can be very difficult, not only for the students, but the families and communities as well. Then there's the chronic and acute experiences. So this could be generational trauma. This could be displacement, bullying, racism or racial issues, witnessing events. So seeing things happen to other people, assault, abuse, and neglect are also a part of this. So what does it look like for kids and youth when they are responding to trauma? Well, I have this picture of this little girl here. She's not causing a problem. Looks like she's doing her work, but you can tell also that there is some impact going on that may be keeping her from being as engaged with the work as possible. And so the way that it sometimes looks is a change in behavior. Maybe the child becomes withdrawn, irritable, or moody. Maybe they have violent outbursts, self-harm or risky behavior. Maybe they're disengaged or start having attendance issues. There's an increased anxiety, fear, worry, guilt, shame about themselves or others. They start discussing the event or reviewing the details, sometimes inappropriate or inappropriate times. Changing in eating or sleeping, increased use of drugs, alcohol, social media, either over or under react to loud noises and sudden movements, or mentioning or asking questions about death and dying. So we have a responsibility, and the responsibility comes not only from IDEA, special education law, education law as a whole with the Every Student Succeeds Act, accreditation requirements. And when we look at where trauma starts showing up in all of those areas, I kind of put in there the theory to practice. So we know that we're teaching literacy. We know that we can use high leverage practices and universal design for learning. And then the who and when, where, why, and how we can use trauma-informed approaches to really to get the literacy taught and do it in a way that demonstrates effective teaching. In the accreditation and also good practices, we also work with educator dispositions. And so that's really the development of the identity as being a teacher and what our roles are, the beliefs about learners and who can learn and who needs to be referred outside of the classroom, and then knowing and supporting learners' assets and areas of growth. Having that high standard with flexibility and support, and then also learning how to communicate with a student who might be struggling or a family or colleagues. Teacher burnout is very high with, what do they say, 3 years for special education and 5 years for general education. And so a lot of these different dispositions can really support teachers as they are trying to move through the system and support their learners. And then just the idea that it's our responsibility to address IEPs, 504s, multi-tiered systems of support, to know who's in your classroom and how to support them, to create safe and empowering environments and address needs using differentiation and scaffolding. Also, growth mindset is a really helpful thing that we can do. So what I've done now on the next few slides, and by the way, I know there's so many words on here, but what I wanted to do was create kind of here's the high leverage practice, here's the literacy development standards, the teacher performance expectations for literacy, and then here are some trauma-informed approaches that can help support those two things. So, and you'll have access to this slide deck and everything, so don't worry about that. But I'm just going to pull out a few things. So when we look at classroom community expectations, some of the things that we can do is, one, of course, create a nice welcoming and safe physically and psychologically safe environment. And the way that we are greeting students, we are almost doing we can do an individualized check-in just as they walk in the room. Having a schedule so that the student understands here's the expectations of the day, and they have that consistency, predictability, and transparency in what's happening in the classroom can be really empowering or influential for them being successful in the classroom, especially if they've dealt with any inconsistency or unpredictability outside of school. And then doing things like restorative justice practices like community building circles, where you can celebrate the wins. You can address anything that's maybe happening at the classroom or community level. And so really thinking about including these trauma-informed approaches into your classroom can be really powerful for the kids. Another area is with the multi-tiered systems of support. We know that in literacy development, of course, we're learning, our learners are, learning about different characters and stories and lived experiences. And this is a great opportunity to use restorative practices to collaboratively problem solve in a non-punitive way. If we are making sure that we have high quality instruction, that's a very fuzzy picture of using stations so that the students can get more small group or individualized support if that's what they need. The targeted instruction and materials can happen at that place too. Scaffolding supports for diverse learners instead of blaming or shaming. I don't think anyone comes into education with the intention of blaming or shaming, but I do think that sometimes some of the curriculum or the pace with which we are encouraged to move through our curriculum can create a very difficult place for someone who's maybe not absorbing the information at the same way that their brain would allow them to if they hadn't dealt with a traumatic event. And so really assessing and validating the knowledge, abilities, skills, and identities, and also recognizing that each one of us, can work at different levels and with different success at different times. So I also have the first picture where they have a restorative practice circle to respond to something that's going on in the class. And then we have the positive supports and interventions, and this really goes along with the Literacy TPE 7.4, which is about active, motivating, and engaging, responsive strategies for the students. I have the little Pomodoro timer and the timer that you can, get for um, uh, the younger elementary classes and everything. But, being able to break things down and make a choice and say, this is how long I can work on this, having that flexibility and dynamic groups, having organization within the classroom, all of these can kind of lower the anxiety or stress within the classroom. I have a picture of the brain as well. And actually teaching students and pre-service teachers and students about the brain and how it works. I highly recommend you go to the first part of this series where we went through and learned about the brain functions and neuroscience. Or even the second session that talked about self-regulation and how it is so closely tied to the brain. But when somebody is under stress, their reasoning part of their brain is usually not online. You often use your default settings, so the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And so it can be really useful to understand that that might be your default setting. And here are some ways, like executive functioning ways or social emotional learning or self-regulation that you can bring your brain back on to be there and support your learning. The other piece is assessment. I have been teaching the academic assessment courses at different universities for a long time. And whenever I ask the question, what was your relationship with assessment? Majority of the class has some sort of horror story of a test or a test taking situation. And that's for people that haven't necessarily dealt with stress or trauma, but that it is, assessment can just be, it can be difficult. And so when we're looking at one, the types of assessments and how we're reading the assessment information, really being aware of the fact that we're pulling in from multiple sources and we're being mindful about when and how and what we're assessing our learners. The avoiding public comparison, I'm always reminded of second grade when we had the eager beavers that, depending on how quickly you moved up the different levels with your multiplication tables, then you were the eager beaver to get to the top. And in second grade, my dad was in the hospital and passed away that year, and I wasn't moving up at certain times. And so that public comparison can be really hard for a kid. And I know it was meant as a motivator, but there's also that piece where sometimes it doesn't hit that way for the child. And so really thinking your way through how you are presenting the assessment information and assessment data. Normalizing revisions. I love this one because my first draft is usually not my final. And so being able to really learn from, our challenges is really important. Teaching growth mindset, having clear criteria. So if learners know what to expect, so that goes back down to the predictability, then they can, have an easier time of meeting the challenges. Providing feedback, and that includes positive feedback along with critiques and guidance for improvement. Minimizing high stakes, because we know that high stakes can create anxiety, and ensuring that students are aware of the assessment purpose, timing, and environments. And I'm speaking really to my special educators in here. For IEPs, we often are coming through and giving so many assessments, and a lot of times we haven't explained why we're giving them or what we're going to use that information for. And so, even if it's just a little bit to make time before you start to share with the learner, it can be a really important moment, especially for someone who's already feeling overwhelmed and possibly behind in their work. And then we have the responsive and sustaining instruction to address intersectional identities and also that effective instruction around universal design for learning. Even in the literacy TPEs, they lean on universal design and assets-based pedagogical approaches, and of course, integrating the family, the full community, which I'll talk about collaboration in a bit. So some of the ways that I recommend doing this are, learning about your students. So an all about me type of page, so that you know who's in your classroom, and then you can really design to their strengths and their areas of growth. Learning about trauma. So this book, how trauma, or how, I think it cut off on the top, but how traumatized children learn. And that's one of the resources as well. They have a whole website around trauma sensitive classrooms. They have videos and readings, a lot of really wonderful downloadables. And the more that you know about the impact that trauma can have in classrooms, then the better you can design your instruction and supports. Having goals and thinking about the goals in mind, and having the flexibility to change goals when the progress isn't happening in the way that you assumed. And then I have the lovely chart of the universal design for learning. So making sure that you have positive and constructive feedback, making sure that you're also working to dismantle systems of harm. So this is that reactivation or re-traumatizing. I don't think any of us would do it purposely, but if you know more about your learners, then you can do a better job of making sure that you're not re-traumatizing in that area. Also, for example, if my sister, who's also an educator, she noticed that she's elementary, and she noticed that in their reader, they were about to talk about going to a funeral in their home, which is a way of having those conversations with your students. But one of her students had just lost his parents. And so one of the ways that she could make sure that she wasn't adding any additional harm was to talk with her school group to find out, like, do we need to have this reading, or are there other things that we can do in order to still teach the lesson but not cause any additional harm? And then also setting goals that align to agency. We want to empower, motivate, and support our students. Then we have the collaboration. So this is how we're working with learners and educators and communities. And within literacy development, this goes from these formal and informal collaborative discussions and conversations that you might have. And then it also talks about working with people with all of the different shareholders to make sure that the curriculum and instruction are meeting the needs of the youth. And it might also mean initiating referrals for students who need that more intensive support. So once again, I recommend reflecting on your own biases, assumptions, and goals and power dynamics that might not validate the families. You know, I have seen where families haven't felt, or I've read about, and there's lots of research on where families share that they have not felt like they were truly included in the meetings on campus, whether they were parent-teacher conferences or IEPs. And really remembering that the parent comes in as the expert and creating that sense of belonging for the family and for the student is really important. Recognizing that everyone on campus plays an important role. Sometimes it's the paraprofessionals, the person who's working in the lunchroom, who's part of the community, who knows more about the children in our classrooms than our teachers do. And so, calling in our community members, and this would go back to if there's a natural disaster or something that's impacting more of the community-wide, bringing in the experts from the community is really important when you're trying to unpack these really difficult times. Sometimes it can be about co-teaching. So bringing in, if you have a wellness team at the school site, teaching history using, literature, which I've got some recommendations for literature as well in a few slides. And then, of course, it has to do with organizing and facilitating effective meetings, especially in the special ed world when we have things like manifestation determinations. And that usually means that something really difficult has been happening. And so making sure that as educators that we're showing up and doing what we can to create a safe space where everyone can share their knowledge and ideas. And then also forming partnerships within and outside of the school community and building that trust and connecting with resources, with lived experiences. And this could be inviting people to come in and share about special topics and how they have been working through different traumatic experiences together. So as I mentioned, I put together, and like I said, you'll have access to this, but some examples of some elementary and secondary texts that deal with different experiences that could be traumatic for students. These resources, I do want to mention, some of them may be great to use in the classroom if it seems appropriate to use them. Others might be a good thing to recommend to families if as they're dealing with different things. So for example, if the child's dealing with grief, I've had many families reach out to me and say, I don't even know how to talk to my child about that. And so the invisible string might be a good way to bring in some literature and then have that conversation. Um, I'm just going to move down. The suicide is also a really difficult topic to bring up, especially with the younger kids. But there are a lot of really great books that are addressing things like this, because although it's hard for an 8-year-old or a 6-year-old to deal with topics like suicide, it's also for some people, for some kids, very real. Um, and then we have, down all the way down to foster care and unstable housing. And so these are just something to get you started. And a lot of these books, like, for example, Push, they actually would have gone into a lot of these different categories. The Fault in Our Stars, they're there. So, you have to decide what is appropriate for for the community of learners that you have or for their families. So I'm not going to go into these because I want us to be able to get out into breakout groups. But I did put together some CEDAR sources, some cadre trauma sensitive strategies, ARRAYA trauma informed approaches, and literacy resources, materials, and tools that speak in some way to trauma-informed approaches. And then also some resources for learning about trauma. So the Helping the Traumatized Children Learn, and Trauma is a Word, Not a Sentence, trauma-informed SEL. The whole school model, this is also useful to remember that when we're talking about trauma-informed approaches, it is always best if they are school-wide. And so this is some materials and resources that can help guide a whole school as they're trying to become more trauma-informed. The burnout and secondary stress, I think, is really important to bring up with educators. Because secondary stress is real. And when our students are hurting, it can be difficult for us not to also feel that energy and that difficulty. The ACEs, if you haven't heard about it, then I put um, uh, some links to some ACEs materials. And it's Nadine Harris Burke, and she has a TED Talk, and she wrote The Deepest Well is the name of that book. And so there's a link there too. And then just some other things. This is an article on It's Not Our Job to Be Trauma Detectives, to kind of realize how we can work together as we are trying to be there for our students and each other. The suicide prevention hotline, which is important to just know and have access to. And then Stanford University has some LibGuides that are really good for looking at even things like disasters and what can our community members do. So we've gotten to the place where we're going to now get into breakout groups, and I'm actually doing pretty well on time. So it looks like we're going to have more time to be in the breakout groups than less. So that's a good thing. But I thought that as I was going through and pulling these different materials together, that as I brought up in the beginning, it's about us being reflexive and reflective. And so I put these questions together that I thought we could talk about in the breakout rooms. These are just guiding questions. So I'll read through them. How am I emulating trauma-informed approaches? So this could be anything from empathy, high expectations, growth mindset, self-care, inclusive strategies. What are the strengths and challenges within my practice that support effective trauma-informed approaches when learning and unlearning? Because that's a lot of what we need to do is get rid of those default settings that we all have. How am I modeling growth, vulnerability, and authenticity? How am I cultivating community? How am I practicing radical compassion towards myself and others to prevent disengagement, re-traumatizing, or burnout? What conscious and formerly unconscious aspects, characteristics, biases, and or beliefs do I want to change? And how can I do that in a loving, sincere, and effective manner? And if you have any resources, text, or information that you can share with each other. And we are going to move out into small groups, and we will put those, we will put those questions still in the chat. And I think our breakout groups ready?
The breakout groups are ready. So you should come up and see that you are being invited to join a breakout room. We've put the wonderful questions from Rebecca in the chat so you can have your discussions. So we'll have about 30 minutes or so, um, give or take, to work in your groups, talk in your group. We wanted to make sure that we had a lot of time because that was something people had said that they really wanted more time to discuss in their groups. Then we'll bring you back. We'll do a little share out before we close. So head off onto your groups if you haven't already done so. And the questions are in the chat. And you'll have folks from this work who will be helping to lead this discussion in your rooms with you. So happy discussion.
And thank you. Ooh, thank you, everyone. I know at least our breakout session was absolutely phenomenal for conversation and sharing resources and ideas and kind of pushing through the dissonance that can happen from trying to do something that is so personal as trauma-informed approaches. But I would say one of the big themes that came out was that normalizing, humanity, that we make mistakes and we keep going back and trying again. And that there's a lot of power in there. And that the other thing that we talked a lot about was you don't have to know why someone's traumatized to have trauma-informed approaches embedded within the curriculum. And I'm not sure if that came across in my presentation, so I wanted to make sure to share that again, and that's really important. You don't have to know the trauma. You just have to know that someone might need a little extra support, help, care, love, and all of that. Annie, did you want to?
Yeah, I'm gonna share our screen here, share my screen here, and let me see if I can get into presentation mode. Um, so thank you so much for that sharing. I think we were all talking about, oh, it's paused. Why is my screen sharing paused? Unpause. This has
Annie,
happened.
we saw it. Annie, we saw it when you put up your screen.
Oh, okay, but I don't know if it would have kept going. Anyways, we're good now. Um, we had wonderful conversations in our group as well. So thank you for that. Let me get here so I can forward. So I do want to take a moment and ask for your feedback. We have a survey form. We're going to be, you may have already gotten this. We're going to be sending them out. There's the QR code there, but we really do value your feedback, and um, we'd like you to take a moment and fill out this form so that we intend on continuing with these communities of practice, both with this group together. This workshop series, I think, we found to be just wonderful to host and to put together. And we're already talking about how we can do the next one. I know in my group, as part of talking about kind of that meta of trauma, how we are dealing with our trauma. And then when we're teaching teacher educators, helping them deal with their trauma so that they can address trauma with their students. So kind of that meta part of it, and how communities of practice like this actually can really help with that, because, more and more now, special educators can be isolated. We're teaching online. That can be more isolating. So having this opportunity to really talk in groups and to share resources and to learn together. I think it's so important. So we want to keep doing this with all of you. We want to keep growing this community of practice. On the ARRAYA site, we hope that you guys will really dive in there and share and talk and stuff as well. And then, as CEDAR, we're going to keep working with groups and organizations together like this and continue with doing these online learning uh, communities of practice. So we really do hope that you will join us and that you will give us feedback so that we can continue to offer sessions that will be helpful and that we can grow our community because many hands make light work and we do more better together.
So did we want to, just real quick, Laura and Allison, did you want to share out on anything from your group? Any main points?
Oh, I didn't realize we were sharing out. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay.
I'm gonna go back here.
There we go.
Laura, did you want to share anything? I or or Laura or Song, anyone?
Or Allison, any main
Well,
points?
I will
I'll
if
just say
nobody else did.
I mean,
I,
yeah.
I think we really liked the first question. This notion of holding students to high expectation while being sympathetic or empathetic. And we talked a lot about that and the importance of it. So we loved the questions. That's good feedback, but we really just appreciated that dichotomy was one of the things that we talked about.
Okay. Annie, was there anything else from your group that you wanted to share before we say au revoir?
I now I'm trying to think, and I'm so sorry that I put us all
No worries, no worries.
put us all off. Everybody probably had in their heads to share out, and then I, did an Annie. Um, we spent a lot talking about how we could really create have communities in our classrooms and ideas for how to create spaces for educators and create those communities to share trauma, how to create opportunities for self-care so that they could better, be present and for themselves and for their students. So those were some of the other things that we talked about in our group as well. Anything, any last minute sharing? Um, Before I beg you again to please give us feedback. Um, and then, just a big thank you. There are ways to contact us. We are all eager to continue these conversations, to continue working with you, to continue sharing resources. So there's the email for the UCCSU Collaborative, for the California CEC, and for the CEDAR Center. You can just CC all of us on it, and we're happy to jump in and engage with everybody and again continue to grow these communities of practice. So yeah, I think I'm actually ending 4 minutes early because I got us off track. So my apologies. Any last minute things that people want to share or share out before we go? Anything coming up from the ARRAYA Center? Any resources or anything that anybody wants to share?
Yeah, I just dropped two things in the chat. Again, just as reminders, we have these are partnerships with the statewide system of support. So this is information in these upcoming events that the K-12 system district folks are getting. And so we're trying to bridge so that faculty in higher education also get information as well, so that we're connecting K-12 and higher ed. So those two events or those two opportunities are in the chat. And we just really appreciated your entire time together. On ARRAYA, including everyone here, uh, we're growing towards 8,000 users now and 11,000 course enrollments on the courses. And so this will also become a course, an asset page. And so we're just excited that you're here with us. And we've enjoyed working with CEDAR and CEC so much and having you here. So thank you so much. And thank you, Rebecca, for today for your wonderful presentation.